All right, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to this XenTegra FSLogix webinar. I appreciate your time here, and I'm absolutely certain that you're going to get a lot of value out of what you're about to hear and what you're about to see. If you could go to the next slide, Dave. On the call today, it's going to be presenting. It's going to be myself, Mark Henderson. I run the application services portion of XenTegra. Also on the call, we'll have Brandon Lee from FSLogix, who will be interjecting here with some questions. And then Dave Young. Dave Young has been around virtualization a lot longer than he'd probably like to admit, but you're going to see a lot of great stuff from the FSLogix side on this webinar. So just a little bit about XenTegra to start off here. Many of you on the webinar know about us, but there's some that don't, and so we just want to introduce XenTegra to you. We are a Citrix Platinum partner based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Our primary footprint is the Southeast, from pretty much Maryland to Miami to Mississippi. However, we are growing very quickly. We focus on Citrix and Citrix success for our customers. So anything that we do is to ensure that the Citrix environment is running up to its premium standard, and that includes working with companies like FSLogix. XenTegra is made up of primarily ex-Citrix employees or ex-Citrites, including myself. So again, that's what our focus is success for your Citrix environment. Now, to gain the value that FSLogix has, you don't have to be a Citrix customer, but primarily that's who XenTegra deals with. As far as the application services division of XenTegra, that's more along the application-centered division of XenTegra. The way we enable you from my side is primarily with AppDNA in the Citrix world, as well as with products like FSLogix. But we enable you through implementation of the products, training, and boot camps. Speaking of boot camps, we do Citrix boot camps. We do Nutanix, IGIL. We also have an FSLogix boot camp. We have one actually Friday this week. It runs from 9 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so you're done by around lunchtime. It's where you can come in. You come into a lab environment virtually, remotely. You'll implement the FSLogix software in that boot camp. You'll install some software you'll be using, and you're going to be able to actually do much of the same stuff that you're going to see in the webinar today. So you'll get to be able to put your hands on it. And if you're interested in doing a POC after this webinar with FSLogix, or if you'd like to get into another boot camp that we're offering, we usually offer about one per month. Just reach out to me, let me know. I can get you into the next boot camp. We normally charge for that, but for attendees of this webinar, we're not going to provide a charge to you so that you can. We want you to get see the value of the software. Also, I wanted to mention on this webinar that FSLogix has generously offered up to give away 2 Amazon $25 gift cards for attendees of this webinar, and that at the end of this webinar or after it's over with, we'll be pulling the 2 winners for those gift cards, and I will notify them via mail, and we'll give you some information on how to receive those as well. So to go on through the XenTegra application services, it's AppDNA, like I said, in the Citrix world. You can use it for application portfolio management. You can use it for migrations on the desktop side, going from Windows 7 to Windows 10. On the server side, going from 03 or 08 R2 to 2012 R2, and then eventually Server 2016. And then something that they've added this year, which we've been asking for, actually I've been around the product for about 6 years now. We've been asking for it all along, is the ability to take your monthly Microsoft patches, that second Tuesday of every month when Microsoft sends them out. You can download them or point AppDNA to your WSUS server, and you can import the patches into AppDNA, and then test them against your entire portfolio, your application portfolio, to see if there's any effect on those patches to your applications, so that you'll know this before you deploy them, and that you can notify the application owner and tell them that their application is being affected. They need to do some testing before it's deployed. No product has ever been able to give you this type of value or ability ever within concerning patches. And I know it's a problem for most customers, and so I want to let you know that it has that ability as well. We also work around application layering, such as Citrix App Disk. They released this in February of this year. So if you are a standard enterprise or platinum customer with Citrix, you own App Disk. It's very it's similar to what Unidesk does as far as layers go at a high level, and what FSLogix does as well, and you'll see some of that. It's placing the application in a VHD out on a server, so that when the user logs into their session, it attaches, and then the application looks as if it's installed locally, and it performs as if it's installed locally. So it's a great way to get applications out of your image and assign them per user entitlement through AD and so on. User environment management, profiles, being able to take the profile away from the operating system, off of a single instance, and put it on the network, so that when the user logs in, the profile follows them. FSLogix has a profile container that we'll talk about today. The ability to take that user's profile, place it out on the network, and then have that profile attach to the session that the user's on to speed up the login. So if you're experiencing slow logins with FSLogix, that's going away for sure. Also, virtual server stress testing for login VSI. We use a product there. Whenever on the XenTegra side, if we upgrade you from 6.5 to, let's say, 7.8 or 7.9 in that new environment, we can use VSI to come in and establish a VSI max. What's the maximum number of users we can get on a server, right? So you'll know that number whenever you're going into that environment, so you can plan on, if you need more memory, more bandwidth, or so on. And then if you're going to go do an upgrade from maybe Office 2013 to 2016, what's that degradation going to look like? How many users am I going to lose going from 2013 to 2016, with 2016 being a more visual application? And then interoperability issues, AppDNA can pinpoint DLL hell, if you will. But then also Java issues. Raise your hand if you've got Java issues, right? Everyone on the call should have Java issues. We all experience them in one way or another, whether it's a web app or a homegrown Java-based application. You're not going to believe what you're about to see, the way FSLogix handles Java issues. And then finally, on the FSLogix side, Office 365 migrations, you're going to see some Office 365. If you're thinking about migrating to it, or if you're using Exchange and cached Exchange mode, and your users are experiencing a slow email experience, you're going to see some things today that are going to rectify that situation for you as well. So what we do on my side, again, is we offer expertise with application issues with AppDNA, like I said, application layering, virtual server stress testing, and then the interop issues. But we also provide migration and application portfolio assistance. So we work with healthcare, finance, government, education, manufacturing. We work with people that have maybe just 25 apps in their portfolio, all the way up to 25,000 applications as well. So not only does AppDNA scale well in that type of environment, but so does also the FSLogix software. And works in both a physical and virtual environment. And then finally, if you're having trouble managing your application portfolio, if things are kind of scattered, then we can certainly help you on the XenTegra side get a grasp of your application portfolio and get it to where it's very manageable for you. So with having said that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Dave Young, let him introduce himself, and then he's going to pick it up from here for us.
Thank you much, Mark. I'm going to actually give Brandon about a minute and a half to tell you a little bit about FSLogix. It'll break up listening to Dave for the next hour and 90 minutes, or hour and a half or 90 minutes. I'm just kidding. We'll go through this pretty quick. But Brandon, why don't you tell them a little bit about us, and then I'll be ready to kick things off.
Sure. Well, FSLogix is venture-backed, and we came out of stealth mode back in 2013 at Fryform Chicago, and here you can see a brief list of a number of our customers. We're a Citrix partner, Microsoft, BizSpark, and VMware technical partner. And as you can see at the bottom, we won Best of Synergy 2015 in the application and desktop virtualization category for our profile containers. But you can check out more about our customers and some more about what we do on our website. Here are a few examples of some testimonials from industry experts talking about our software. But once again, you can check us out on social media. We're at FSLogix on Twitter, on Facebook, LinkedIn, and you can see what all the guys like Freak, Rory, James, and Andrew have to say about us.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Brandon.
No problem.
So, yeah. So I want to give everybody a little of my background before we get rolling on this, so everybody understands where I'm coming from. Started desktop virtualization. It's hard to believe, but it was in 2003. And it was before desktop virtualization really had anything going on. We were doing what I call the ultimate four-man's VDI, and that was because we had users, needed multiple desktops, et cetera, et cetera. We had a lot of Citrix silos and a lot of pain points. So we were ultimately doing VDI with DNS direction. So the user would launch their desktop via DNS URL, right? And as we started to look at that, I've been doing this a long time. I actually did a lot of consulting. If you can remember back to the days of SoftGrid and Install, I did a lot of consulting around that, a lot of server consulting, and then ultimately tried to focus myself on desktop because there was ultimately more things that needed to be solved there. As we all know, the desktop is a complicated beast, which for some of us in IT, that's a good thing. Unless you want to end up like me, involved with a lot of gray hair because you're pulling your hair out, there's a lot of challenges that we deal with. So I, after consulting, I joined VMware as part of the core founding team of SEs for desktop virtualization and spent 8 years doing that. And that was a lot of fun, getting to kind of drive the direction of where they were going. And then I left there and actually was going to retire from IT. And Kevin Goodman, who I'd worked with, called me up one day. It was kind of weird. It was a year and a day after I had left VMware. And he said, hey, I'm doing some cool things. How would you like to come join us? I started checking out what he was doing, and lo and behold, he was right. He was doing some cool things. And one of those things really dealt around the complication around the base image. And as we look at that complication around the base image, we have had to do things like build silos, right? And because we had to build these silos, it was because this application doesn't work well with that application. I can't truly isolate them. I tried doing it with, ThinApp or SoftGrid or AppView, whatever it was at the time, and those became complicated. And then we had to worry about leaving the bubble, coming back into the bubble. So as I started looking at what he was doing, I was like, this is pretty cool. We're able to use the native install, run locally or logically local, and start to reduce those silos and the app virtualization complexities that we have. So it's pretty cool what we're able to do, and I'm going to take you kind of through some of that stuff and how we do it. But the first thing I want to show you is how easy it is to set up our software. Now, Mark runs these boot camps, and I'm sure they don't spend hours and hours setting up the software. It's really about getting your head around how do I change what I'm doing so I can apply this technology to what I'm doing, right? We are very much different than what you're used to. We don't talk about throwing things into the bubble. We talk about layering. And I'm personally not a big fan of the word layering. I like the word revelation, or we reveal the code to the users or the insult to the users. However, the industry doesn't follow that. It's all about layering. So we'll talk about it as layering. So I'm going to show you this quick little video of how we set up. So basically, you're going to execute the setup. You're going to put a product key in or just click I agree, and that'll give you a demo license. You're going to do the initialization and installation. And depending on how you got your server set up, you might get a security prompt. And you're kind of pretty much done at that point. Now, the tough part is configuring everything. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to configure the actual profiles piece. Profiles have been a pain in a lot of people's existence for a long time. And as we start to look at some of the things that we're going to do with profiles, you'll see that we can actually change how your whole profile infrastructure is designed and works, right? But it's really going to be very minor impact to the end user. So you'll see I'm going to go in here to the FSLogix apps folder. I'm going to hit the configuration tool. We'll take the security prompt, and we'll go ahead and configure it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to configure our VHD location. This is where I want to store all that user's profile in the VHD, what that location is. Now, we support DFS shares, we support regular URLs, et cetera, et cetera. So here you're going to see, this is a closed system. I'm going to put in server name share, and when we finish this, I'll actually back it up to see demo. But we can now start to decide where we want to put this data, okay? And we're going to talk about some of the science around why a VHD is faster than typical profiles. But then we'll include who we want, leave it as everyone. We're going to set our size to whatever we desire. We're going to decide if we want to do full allocation or dynamic allocation. Dynamic allocation is really cool because we can now do things on the server side that don't impact the user's experience. So you'll see I set the retry to 2 and 5 seconds. Everything's good. I'm going to just go change this real quick back to C demo so that we can have it on the local system just for this particular demo. So off we go, select folder, and I hit save, and we are done with setting up our profiles piece, okay? So as we start to look at that, that's a pretty simple setup. Now we're less than 4 minutes into it. Now we can start to take advantage of all the things that the FSLogix profile tool gives us. We're going to move along to the next piece. We're going to talk about Java. There's not an agency, a company, or an individual in this world that I don't think has a Java problem. And part of the reason behind the Java problems is we as IT don't control the rest of the world. And if I'm, let's say I'm a hospital and I have to go out to Medicaid's website and verify a user has, entitlement, right? I can't tell Medicaid or the government, hey, our security standard is the latest and greatest version of Java. You must update. Well, unless you want to pay a lot more taxes, because Medicaid may have just spent $1 million or $1 billion or $1 gajillion building that website in a particular version of Java. So as we start to look at that, that website would be one that we trust, but we have to lower our security and able to have that happen. So what we give the ability to do is direct a user based on a URL or application to a specific version of Java. Okay, so I can say for Medicaid, use older than Umpty Squat version of Java, and for everything else, use the latest and greatest. And know that my security posture has not been compromised because we know we can trust the Medicaid site. It's not a random site out there that a user goes to for a phishing exercise, right? So that's what we do on Java. Pretty simple. Amazing the results we get out of it. Just kind of simplifies your environment. So the next piece we're going to talk about is the application and profile containers, right? So what this gives us the ability to do is have user persistence, okay, in a VDI or a XenApp environment without roaming profiles or folder redirection, okay? And what that gives us the capability to do is basically intercept a folder, and once we intercept that folder, we can then have them write everything. So an example for profiles would be intercept C users %username. And when I intercept that, instead of having them go out to a folder redirection, which can be slow, they will actually go to this VHD. And the reason that the VHD is so much faster is because of the way that we're communicating with that data. I was just doing an exercise setting up for this, and I don't know if you guys heard at the beginning of it, I couldn't start recording because I was short on disk space. It's actually a little kind of intentional. This PowerPoint that I'm showing you is 108 megs in size. And what I was doing some research on is when I launch it from a network share, guess what happens? That 108 meg gets transferred to the local temp directory, okay? And when it gets transferred to the local temp directory, I have to wait for 108 meg copy, right? Versus when we do VHD, I read the blocks for that 108 meg, and I only read the blocks that I actually need to read. I don't have to read the whole 108 meg file. I only have to read the portions that I actually need. So it gives us an immense increase in performance. I don't think anybody on the phone would argue with me that local disk access will always be faster than network access. And the reason being is it's fetch and retrieve when we go on the network versus when we're reading local disk, it's read blocks, right? And we're able to take that read blocks local disk type technology and apply it to a VHD running out on the network. So pretty exciting stuff on what we're able to do. And then the other thing we can do is we can layer those applications that we want to into a VHD, so I can have a single VHD for multiple users, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives us a lot of flexibility on what we're doing. You can use all this stuff in conjunction with a lot of the, well, all the Citrix projects and products that are out there. So it gives us a lot of flexibility to change what we're doing. So let's see a little setup real quick. We'll take a look at this video, and we're actually going to do a rule, and we're going to layer an application so that you can see how this works. And we're going to pick something simple. I'm going to pick Google Chrome because, well, it's on every system I use, so it's a quick and easy one for us to show. So you can see I'm going to create a rule set. I'm going to call it demo. I'm going to enter it, and then it's going to prompt me which application do I want to do, right? So I'm going to choose Google Chrome, and I'm going to hit scan. Basically what we're doing at this point is we're reading all the uninstalled information. And by reading that uninstalled information, I know what registry keys to hide and what files to hide. So you can see when I apply this rule to the system that we're going to have the application is going to disappear, right? It's gone. Icon disappeared on the desktop, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of those underpinnings so you can see that the application truly is gone. So we're going to go to the control panel. We're going to take a look at our program, and you'll see that when I go in here that there is no Google Chrome anymore, right? And all I did was hide all the components of Google Chrome, basically did an uninstall, right? So now we're going to go back, and we're going to take that rule off, and you'll see Google Chrome pops back up. And as Google Chrome pops back up, we'll go back to the control panel, and we'll take a look, and we'll refresh, and there's Google Chrome. All right, so by layering this or hiding this, I can now have different applications entitled for a user, right? And by having those applications entitled for a user, I could do something like install Office 2010, 2013, and 2016, all on the same system. And by having those all on the same system, my complexity starts to get removed. Because all I do is I say, hey, Dave Young, he's old-fashioned, he likes Office 2010. I'm going to give him Office 2010 and allow him to be able to run Office 2010. And then we're going to have Mark, who's going to be able to run Office 2016, right? All coming from the same machine. And the way we get away with that is from the user and the machine perspective, Office 2010 only exists for that user, right? Now we can do that on a group, and we can have a group of people that see 2010, and that group would see it. But ultimately, none of the other users that are outside of that group will be able to see it. We get a lot of feedback in regards to how does this help with licensing? And it's pretty simple. You're going to show in your license audit, you're going to run your tool. It's not going to see the application for that user, and therefore it doesn't exist, right? A lot of times, Adobe and Microsoft, when they know that a customer is using our product, all they want to see is your group memberships, right? What groups, how many, and you're done. So you're able to actually prove who has access to the software in the environment. So let's take a little talk about some of the science, right? A couple months ago, time's flown by, my boss and Helge Klein had a discussion, and they had a great idea. So I got a big to-do. Dave, show the difference between a roaming profile, traditional profile, and what FSLogix does with the profile. So I did. I set up an environment, and I want to kind of set the precursor to what this environment is that I'm going to talk about. It is a single XenDesktop environment. One user has folder redirection turned on with a roaming profile. That user is called traditional. And the other user, FSLogix, is using an FSLogix profile container. Okay? you're going to see that the desktops are identical, and we're actually logging into the same logical desktop, okay, for this test, and that the data is identical, okay. Literally, as I added data to, kind of simulate or make it look like a real user's desktop, I did it via a script so that each user had the same exact amount of bytes, okay. So the files are identical. And you're going to see a huge difference in what we're doing. So what we deal with today, I'm going to go ahead and play this video and talk through it. What we deal with today from an end user perspective is a long login. And you're going to see we're logging in as traditional, and this login is going to take about 40 seconds. And why is it going to take 40 seconds? Well, the user saves something to their desktop, and because they save something to their desktop, now I have to transfer that file down. Now, there's a lot of technologies that'll put stubs in and things like that, but we ultimately go back to, I still have to fetch and retrieve that data. And depending on what your environment's like, that can be pretty painful, right? If you look at the typical file server and how it works, there's congestions and there's bottlenecks, and it's based on how many files it can handle being open, right? And it's all traffic copy, right? So, we want to make sure that, not everybody gets the immediate open. So it has to stop things, and it brings the file up for the next user and all that good stuff. And there's an old calculation. You can see it took about 40 seconds. There's an old calculation that we used to use that basically said how many CPUs you had would give you the number of file opens you could support, right? And it was a lot of swagging because nobody knows what the user's going to do. Now, FSLogix is going to log in now, and we're going to put in our password. You're going to see a much different response. We're going to be right at about 10 seconds, right? User desktop's there. You can see all the files are there, and we are in, okay? So from a user perspective, night and day, same thing that I'm doing, right? But it's night and day what the performance is. And we'll talk about how we get away with that. So let's look at the science. One of the things Mark was saying as we were talking about this was, being able to do something repeatable in your environment so you can benchmark it or decide how much it can support. I remember the days, and a lot of us on this call, we're part of the days of the art, right? We would go look at something, we had experience, and we'd say, I'd be talking to a big company, and they'd say, hey, we've got 10,000 users, how many file shares do I need, right? And we'd go through and come up with a number and a swag based on what technology was out there, how fast the disk was, and say, for 10,000 users, you're going to need 30. Well, it was a guess. We didn't have any real data, and we couldn't come up with anything predictable because nobody controls what the end user does on their desktop, right? Nobody comes and says, hey, everybody, now hit enter and open up Outlook. Hey, everybody, now hit enter and open up your Excel spreadsheet. Or, let's number everybody 1 to 1,000, and we have to go through this in a sequential order so nobody locks up the system, right? We just can't do that, right? And we can't tell the user, and we can't spend all of our time with the user saying, don't save anything to the desktop. That's all the things that start to impact what we're doing. So to get down to the science, real metrics, real numbers, real data, we use Uber Agent. And you can use Uber Agent or any product you so desire. But what we did is we wanted to go in and take a look at what's going on. So let's look at the science for the login, right? So the two logins that we did, the FSLogix and the traditional, you'll see here's the roll-up data, right? Traditional login, 42.98 seconds. We'll be nice and call that 42. And the FSLogix login, 7.78. Once again, we'll call that 8 seconds. 42 to 8 seconds, that's huge. And if we look at what's going on in that login, we'll start to understand, right? So if you look here at the stacks, the biggest time eater, 20 seconds, is the user profile, right? The next thing is the group policy. And then you see that short little one, that shell start. That's one of the things that we all have to pay a tax to Microsoft in on the login. That one's about 5.73 seconds, right? So we can't get rid of the shell start. We got to look at what can we focus on in other areas. So what's causing that large amount of time, right? So in the traditional login, folder redirection was part of it. Setting that all up, reading the files, et cetera, et cetera. You can see here that it took 15.63 seconds, right? And when I did this original test, Helge, thanks Helge, he texted me one day and he says, Dave, you've got 2 GPOs being applied. If you remove one, you'll cut your login time in half, right? And we all know that we've got overlapping GPOs in our environment. So I was very thankful Helge told me that because you know, we were going on 1 minute and 30 seconds versus 40-something seconds, right? So as we start to look at all these things, you know, GPO, folder redirection, profiles start to eat up a large portion of that login. If we look at the FSLogix login, you'll see here a login duration about 8 seconds, right? And look at what the big hitter was. It's shell start. Now, in this particular instance, it's 5.83 seconds, right? That's something that we can't necessarily get rid of, but all the other stuff is minor in comparison, right? We remove the 2 big hitters from the beginning and reduce them, and that's how we're able to reduce our login time. Almost every time provable, right? I can do an analysis on your system, on your logins, and say, hey, if you implement our product, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to go from this to this, right? Because I can go out and I can subtract, you know, the folder redirection. I can subtract the GPO logins, you know, all that stuff, and say, hey, by changing your technology, I can now reduce that login with data that will support it, right? So we'll know what we're going to get. So if we look here at the same comparison of data, folder redirection, you look here, and everybody needs to look really, really close because that's a big yellow line, but it's at 0.45 seconds. Not 45 seconds, 0.45 seconds. And when we think about that, you know, that starts to really change. It's the science that we're dealing with and the data, not the you know, the art of what we do. So once again, comparative login, 42 seconds to 8 seconds, right? And I don't know about you guys, but if I could roll out a piece of software in my environment that would reduce my login time from 42 seconds to 8 seconds, I think I might have some happy customers. We actually had a customer, I heard this story yesterday, he called us up to thank us for helping him out with something. And he says, one of my clients, one of his end users, was so happy with her new login that she mailed him a bottle of rum. Now, there may have been some laws broken, but, you know, she was so happy with IT, she mailed him a bottle of rum. And he asked if, you know, we wanted to partake in sharing that. And I kind of joked, I said, well, don't mail it. You'll actually get in trouble if you get caught. But, you know, when we look at that, that's making our end user happy, right? Which, you know, IT for the longest time has been the one to say no, right? No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. And part of it was they didn't have the technology to be able to say yes. Well, now you could reduce your user's login, still give them, you know, the flexibility of user persistence and the desire of IT of non-persistent desktop, right, or app server or whatever we want to use, and get the best of both worlds. So, what is the big eater in the most of this stuff? It's the data transfer. That's fetch and retrieve, right? If I have a 10 meg file, I got to pull a 10 meg file down. If it's a 400 meg file, I got to pull a 400 meg file down. And when we look at that whole fetch and retrieve piece of it, that is what is really slow. I had a customer that didn't understand the difference between SMB, fetch and retrieve, and a VHD, right? And so the analysis or the comparison goes like this. Fetch and retrieve is like going and looking at the word in the dictionary. And in order to look up the word, we'll use the word whatever. To look it up, you have to read every page, every entry between A and whatever. Versus when you use a VHD, instead of looking at all those other pages, you go exactly to the page, to the paragraph, to the entry in the dictionary or whatever, and you read that block of data, right? So it's significantly different than what we're doing with traditional CIF shares and SMB and roaming profiles. So a little bit about folder redirection and the problem. It's a traffic problem. Everybody comes in, they're opening files. They can only handle so many file opens at a time, so people get queued, right? And the hard thing about predicting that is, you know, the user calls, everybody logs in, you know, it's the call center. Everybody logs in at 7 a.m. User calls and says it's slow. By the time we get onto it as IT and we have them try again, everybody's logged in, the queuing's down, and everything works just fine, right? So it makes it very difficult to actually pinpoint that. We can always throw hardware at it. I'm working on a project with a customer where they're getting ready to spend probably $1 million in storage because of Office 365. And we're saying don't do that. Look at what we do because number one, if you haven't worked with Office 365 and put OSTs out under folder redirection, there's a lot of issues around that. One of those issues is the OST is a living, breathing database. Every time an email comes in, guess what? We have to do an extent. And those extents, are very small pieces compared to the amount of performance the user gets, right? And so as we look at that, what happens is the performance, just starts to sink, right? So we're looking at, being able to replace that for them. And that kind of brings up the summary. I just want to give you the science and the numbers behind this. The red line is that traditional login. We use the load generator to create load. You can see some spikes where I turn things up. Those two big spikes are where I really want to see where this would break. And I turned that up to full speed. In actuality, I could regain control of the environment. I had to power cycle a couple of the load generating heads because I couldn't get into them, right? Now, we were coming from the same file share, okay, as all this other traffic, so there's a lot of queuing going on, okay? But you can see the average, that red line goes from just above 10 seconds to just over 15 seconds and would continue to grow the more load you put on there. And would continue to have spikes and valleys as you start to do it. Now, if you look at the FSLogix line, you see that our data is fairly consistent, other than when I locked up that server, right? And that we're able to get a more predictable performance, right? I can say I can take this from 10 users to 100 users to 1,000 users to 10,000 users and have predictable performance, all right? And that's a very important thing in IT these days. I think the days of the science experiment are gone for IT, and people are expecting professionalism and predictable numbers, right? And we need to be able to go back and tell our customers that, hey, we need to predict, what we're doing.
Hey,
I think
Dave.
I heard a question coming in.
Yeah, Dave, this is Mark. Got a question. Can your profile solution handle moving profiles from V2 to V5 for Windows 7 to Windows 10 migration?
So you're going to need to use your same tools to migrate that profile. We don't do the transfer of the profile or the transformation of the profile. But you can take that profile and move a user from Windows 7, run a tool that will actually upgrade it to the new version and have them attach that same one. We're not in the business of transforming those profiles.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about how the whole thing works so everybody can kind of have an idea of what's going on, right? So we're really around having a single image. Now, I'm a realist. I've been in IT a long time, and I know there's politics, there's boundaries, there's business units, et cetera, and we will probably never get to one golden image, right? But technically we could, right? With all the technology in play, using our products and other products that are out there, we could get to a single image. Because from our perspective, app doesn't really exist unless it's turned on, right? So what we do is we install those apps that come from the machine. When the user logs in, our agent, our filter driver, says, hey, I have Dave Young here. I need to apply these permissions or these rules, reveal these applications to Dave Young. So I say, hey, let him see Adobe, let him see Office 2013, right? Whatever it may be. I allow that user's ID to see those, okay? And then when a different user logs in, I apply a different rule. So when Mark logs in, I apply the rules that specifically are for Mark, right? And that gives us the capability to have single image, multiple users. And it's pretty simple the way it works. And I've actually done some research, and there's some webinars that are going to come out where I actually think we can increase your performance, right? Because we're removing some context switching and things like that. So future webinars that come out in regards to that, driving the next layer of performance out of the system. So that's pretty much how we work. I want to talk a little bit about Office 365. Office 365 seems to be something that we're all faced with, that we're getting ready to look at, and there's a couple things that we need to think about. Number one, Office 365, if you go hosted mode and you're doing, any kind of desktop virtualization or session virtualization, we have to start worrying about the OST, okay? And as we start to worry about that, the end user wants the OST, IT doesn't, right? because, well, we're going to re-download data. It just becomes a nightmare, right? And so as we start to look at Outlook in itself, the OST is a big thing. Well, we have a solution. We launched it a couple weeks ago. It's an Office 365 container, okay, that we can actually take just the OST data, basically App Data Local Mail, Microsoft Mail, and put that into a VHD. So now we can persist that cache, okay, to the user session. And that means we don't have to re-download it. The user's not complaining with the speed of, you know, mail, et cetera, et cetera. And IT doesn't have to take the hit of those OSTs. And if you don't trust me, well, I would say trust me on this one. Be very, very careful of where you put that OST if you're going to do folder redirection. And ultimately, it works well for a little bit, but as you put more and more users on, you will end up not being an IT hero, okay? You know, it's the quickest way to be an IT zero is by doing that, because it's going to impact your performance. I'm dealing with a customer where they have just a 500 meg OST that they allow the users to keep. And they're getting complaints because they can't search, right? And so as we start to look at all this stuff, right, these are things that we absolutely need to consider. We are finishing up the Office 365 solution, right, which will include OSTs. It's going to include OneDrive files, right, and it's going to include the Office 365 settings. Big thing to note, you cannot install and configure OneDrive across a folder redirection or network path, right? It will stop you. You can't click next, right? We are finalizing the capabilities to do that, okay? So some cool special sauce from FSLogix so that we can do that. And then the other big thing to note and to think about as we look at this, many of us in our careers just wrapped up single sign-on, right? Getting all these multiple logins down to single sign-on. And I'll bet most of us are very happy to have that project done, right? Well, Office 365 kind of breaks that, right? Because you have to have the user authenticate the application, right? The entitlement of that application to Microsoft. Now, there are some things that you can read about how to make it not count towards them on a shared environment. I encourage you to do that reading. But ultimately, now the user has to log in to the application to entitle it every time we re-provision them, right? So whether they're on a non-persistent desktop or a shared XenApp server, right? Now, every time they log in, they have to authenticate their application. And I'm sure none of us want to be the one to tell the end user that that's just what they have to do, right? So we're coming up with a solution, just finishing up testing on it, that will actually take that entitlement and roam it with the user so that they don't have to re-authenticate every time they log into a different machine. So just a few things to think about as you start to look at your Office 365 environment. We do a lot to make that better. It's kind of a journey. First thing's mail, next thing's going to be OneDrive, you know, and we're releasing code almost weekly to address different issues within that particular environment for the end user. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges around folder redirection, right? Just so everybody's on the same page. You know, it's SMB traffic, right? And it's SMB traffic throughout the session, right? It's pretty fast overall, right? Because, hey, I don't have to actually pull the data unless I'm accessing it. But it does slow down after the login, right? And if the file server is constrained, it's heavy load, login time for everybody, that performance is going to vary, right? It's not predictable for us, all right? So I'm going to give you an example of folder redirection on a busy search, on a busy server by utilizing search. Now, one of the things, as I was doing this particular presentation I was gearing up for, I did a search on virtual desktop or XenApp server optimization, right? And the #1 thing that came up was shutdown search. And in the words of Helge Klein, that's BS, right? IT needs to stop shutting down things that impact the user's experience. And the reason being is, you know, if the user needs to search for something, they need to search for something. So watch this little video. You'll see we're going to do a search on the letter ED, and you'll see this is a busy file server. It takes a significant amount of time. And as we start to think about that from a user perspective, that's not good. That's wasted man hours, right? Now, granted, they'll go do other things, but if they're in the middle of trying to pull a presentation together where they're big boss, right, and they tell, the big boss that, hey, I can't get it done because I can't find it, right, that's an IT problem, right, and that's not good for us. So you can see it took a little bit of time for that to come back. An event viewer is a local application, right, but it had to go out and search all these folder redirections, et cetera, and that's what causes us the problem. So keep that in the back of your mind as you're designing your environment and trying to optimize it. So I want to turn it over for questions. We're 10 minutes to the hour, so we got a little bit of time. I had a little bit of bonding time with Gabe a couple weeks ago at Bryform, and one of the comments that came out of that was, FSLogix 365 container, it seems like a no-brainer to enable the functionality we've wanted for the last 15 years. And Gabe and I have been in this environment, in this industry for a long time, and we've seen a lot of things come and go. And one of the things we're seeing in IT is, hey, we need to start re-enabling things that we disabled because we couldn't do things in the past, right? So, you go out and poll your end users and ask them how happy they would be if we were able to, give them local file access to their OSP, right? They'd probably be ecstatic, right? When we watch the end user's response about, wow, that would be great, those are the things we need to start bringing back. So with that, I'll ask Brandon if he'll ask me a couple questions that came in through the queue, and we will see what we can do for those. Brandon, you got questions out there? Well, I'll give a couple questions that I get asked a lot. What kind of infrastructure do you need for FSLogix? The short answer is none. We run as an agent on the user device, okay? So if they're coming into a virtual desktop or an internet server, you're going to install the agent there. And then we leverage your existing file share infrastructure. So to do those profiles, you're going to need a file share infrastructure. Now, one of the things I warn people about is be careful. If you want to see great improvements, don't put us on the same over-congested file server. Okay. Granted, we're going to take significantly less.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dave. Brandon, go ahead and try it again. I went ahead and unmuted you manually.
All right.
Mute button gets us.
There we go.
All right, I can hear you, Brandon. Let me just finish that up with the file server. So if you have a congested file server and you put us on that congested file server, we're going to reduce the amount of load on it, but we're still going to be in the same traffic scenario, right? So just keep that in the back of your mind as you design for transition. I tell people, put it on a new server so that we can manage through that transition, then you can decommission the old server. And you'll see roughly somewhere in a 25% plus decrease in I/O overall. All right, Brandon, go for it.
Okay, so related to that, as far as, let's say we're having to deal with user profiles and we're already using, Citrix UPM, what type of, status or would it take to migrate from UPM to, say, FSLogix profiles?
Gotcha. So, I like to brag that we work with everybody, right? Some of my poor English, we make everybody more better, right? Mo better. And we can work with UPM, we can work with AppSense, we can work with Res, we can work with, roaming profiles. We work with all those. And what I like to tell people is think about us as that fancy new cache that you threw in front of your storage, right? And so we're that fancy new cache that you can throw in front of that storage, or that fancy new tool you can throw in front of those other tools to make your user profile faster. Ultimately, what it comes down to is because we're storing this out in a VHD and we're instantaneously reconnecting the user to it, you don't have to manage all the replication in those legacy environments, right? you're still going to use their tools to manage your user's environment and to delete temp files and to set the settings for this application and all of that stuff. But you're not going to use them to fetch and retrieve your profile from a share or a database or whatever it may be. So we can work with those, I call it the turbocharger, right? Same engine, we're going to throw a turbocharger in it, make it faster.
So then as a user, can I be logged into a hosted desktop and like a hosted app, with separate underlying hosts and have my profile attached to both?
So there are some laws of physics or laws of IT that we have to maintain, okay? We cannot allow two writes on a file at the same time. That is just a law of IT, right? So what we can do, we have some technology that allows us to basically do last writer wins type scenarios. So what you would have is your normal VHD for your profile, and then we would use a differencing VHD so that your desktop and your XenApp environment have a differencing disk, right, and allow that to be the stored location, and then last writer wins. So a lot of the people that say, hey, I'm doing a desktop and XenApp, they say the user doesn't need anything saved for the XenApp experience, right? What they need is to be able to go in and launch mail or whatever it is. So by using that differencing technology on the diff disk, we can now say, hey, let's make the virtual desktop be the last writer that wins. So it gives us the capability to architect for our success in our environments. So that is one of the things that we can do for that type of scenario.
All right, thanks, Dave. So let's talk a little bit about this Office 365 container real quick. Are there really any limitations right now as far as the infrastructure goes? Can I run this on XenApp, Zen Desktop? Can I just enable this for everyone? Or
so the only limitation is, how happy you want to make your users. And I joke a little bit about that. We support XenApp, Zen Desktop, VMware View, whatever it was, Dell decommissioned, right? All these different environments, we really don't care, right? All we really care is, are you on Windows 7 or higher, on 2008 or higher? I actually I had an unexpected experience. Many of us in IT have to support our families as their IT go-to guy. My brother called me a few weeks ago and said, my laptop's not behaving, can you help me? All right, so he brought it over, and we determined, yeah, it wasn't behaving. The power button wasn't working anymore. So we replaced it. And then he asked me, he says, can you help me replace it, get all my stuff back together? And we did, and he'd done some backups and things like that. But ultimately, it came down to, on a physical desktop, what I ended up installing on his desktop was our profile tools, right? And we've got it run into just a local VHD. But the reason I did that is because the next time his laptop dies, all I have to do is back up that one VHD, and I can actually re-import that onto whatever desktop he's using, and instantaneously it will be right back to where it was. So it doesn't really matter what the infrastructure is to us. We work with all of them, and we try to be as neutral on that as we can.
Dave, this is Mark. We just got a question in. Can indexing be enabled on XenApp servers, or is that still being worked on?
Still being worked on. That's a great question. I'll kind of go through the science behind it. Search was built, I think it was 17 years ago was the last update, and it was really built for multi-user, or excuse me, single-user mode, not for multi-user mode. There is one search index for the entire system, which means when we have shared users coming in, there's a lot of complication. We do handle search in single-user mode, no problem. We are working on multi-user mode. Part of the complication of what we're working on is that single database. You got to cleave in the user's piece of it, restart the service, and when we restart the service, another user may be using it. So there's a lot of things that need to be addressed on what we're doing for search. Our CTO, Randy, he's working on it. He's working on it hard because he sees this as a huge thing that IT has suffered with for the last 10 plus years, what's going on with search.
All right, great, thank you. Brandon, do you have any more?
No, I think that's it on our end. Looks like we're at the top of the hour.
Yeah, we are. Thank you for that. I just wanted to remind everyone, we're giving away a couple of Amazon gift cards. If you've been chosen as the winner for one of those cards, then we will contact you via email and give you instructions on how to claim the card. The other thing I wanted to mention, if you're interested in a POC for FSLogix in your environment, then just reach out to me. I'll send an email to everyone after this webinar is over later on today. You can reach out to me and we'll get that set up. I can promise you we can have it set up and functioning in your environment within an hour, of course. And then also, if you are interested in the boot camp that we have, then what I can do is you can reach out to me as well. And we can schedule you. The one that we're having this Friday is already full. However, we're going to have one a month. So you can reach out to me and we'll get you scheduled for that. Normally we charge for those boot camps, but since you attended the webinar today, that's your free pass into the boot camp. Dave, Brandon, you have anything else to finish up with?
I'll just close with it's an exciting time in the eyes of Dave for IT as we start to transition into this next layer of things that we're doing. You know, especially on the desktop virtualization side, there's been a lot of challenges that we've all had to face, right? And whether it's desktop virtualization or you know, XenApp, RDSH stuff, we've all had a lot of challenges. XenTegra's got a lot of experience. Leverage them. Leverage them. You know, you wouldn't do your own heart surgery, right? You'd go get an expert to help you out. Leverage them for that expertise, because I can guarantee they've probably seen a lot of things that maybe we haven't seen. So leverage that expertise.
All right, great. All right, well, thank you all again for attending the webinar. I'll send out an email later on, and it'll also have a link out to the XenTegra Application Services YouTube channel. We recorded this, and so we'll post it up there as well. So if anyone else would like to see it in your organization, then just point them to the link. So again, thank you all very much for attending, and have a great rest of the week. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Brandon, sorry. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.